Another night, and you're still wide awake, traveler? Ah, those eyes that refuse to shut. Perhaps it's the cool breeze of the dawn or the distant whisper of owls that keeps you from sleeping. Or maybe it's an unease that even you can't quite grasp. Well, since we're here, you awake, me with my aching back, and the fire still crackling. I might as well share another memory. Or something like it. Settle in. Take off your boots and feel your weight sink into the earth. And if I may offer a word of advice, don't take everything you hear tonight too seriously. Some things only exist before sleep takes you and vanish with the first yawn. So before the embers cool and my memories slip away again, if you truly enjoy these nights with me, consider subscribing to the channel and liking this video. Or don't, if sleep claims you first. By the way, would you tell me where you're listening from, traveler? Which city? What time? What battle did you face today to end up here? Now close your eyes, feel the warmth of the fire, and let's walk together through this memory. Or would it be a dream? I remember, or I think I remember, that field. A stretch of land without a name, color, or scent. Yet it is said to have been the site of a battle so bloody that no historian dares document it. The irony? Nobody seems to recall who fought, or why. Not even me. All I can recall is the muffled sound of footsteps in the mud and the dull clanging of weapons that may have never been raised. It was flat, expressionless. The grass bore a shade of green that painters would label as faded. A few large moss-covered stones lay scattered without purpose, and a dry trunk from a tree that fell decades ago. Or perhaps just yesterday, I couldn't tell. I went there searching for something or someone. Maybe an old war companion, or an enemy I vowed to defeat. Perhaps just for myself. In my memory, the clearest one, the one that carries the scent of wet earth, the field lay shrouded in a low fog, so low that I could hardly see my own feet. I walked slowly, each step sinking a little deeper into the thick muck. It was as if the ground wished to swallow me, pulling me back to a place I had never truly left. Atop a hill, yes, I think there was a hill, lay a banner. Folded, dirty, torn. I recognized the colors, gray and burgundy, featuring a symbol that appeared to be a shield cracked down the middle. But no one held that standard. It was as if it had been abandoned there either carelessly or out of shame. Curiously, I swore I heard thunder at that moment. But the sky was clear, an opaque blue devoid of clouds. Only the sound lingered, muffled, like a memory echoing just before it surfaces. I walked on. 3 steps, or maybe 10. The truth is, I can't recall how many, because each step seemed to repeat itself, as if the field had no end, or was folding over itself like an old blanket. I spotted a helmet half buried. I kicked it, and it rolled away, revealing an ant nest inside. Warriors returned to the earth. Or perhaps they had never left. By the way, there was a strange scent in the air. It wasn't blood, nor death. It was tea. Yes, warm tea. Chamomile, perhaps. As if someone, instead of fighting, had chosen to sit down and boil water in the midst of a carnage that never was. I sat down. There was a circle of stones that appeared to be carefully arranged, an extinguished fire, ancient, with damp charcoal. I pulled my cloak over my shoulders and remained there, listening. Nothing. No sound. Neither birds nor wind, just a faint buzzing in my ear, or within my head. Have you ever felt something happened, but no one believes you? That field was exactly that. A place of absolute denial. I call it the field of the forgotten battle, but I'm not even sure that's the right name. Maybe it has other names, given by other old souls like me, who sit by the fire and murmur their versions of the same lie. There was a stone with marks on it, as if someone had tried to carve something and given up. Maybe an epitaph, or a recipe. Here lies a man who never fought. Sounds fair. I remained there until the sun disappeared behind the invisible hills. The chill rose from the ground. My bones creaked like old gates. And then I saw, or thought I saw, silhouettes, many, still, watching me. They didn't move. They didn't approach. Elongated shadows like soldiers, or scarecrows. I closed my eyes. I opened them. Nothing, perhaps everything. Sometimes I wonder if all of that really happened. After that field where nothing moved, where silence weighed more than any armor ever worn, I decided to follow a path. Or rather, it revealed itself beneath my feet, as if someone, or something, wanted me to keep walking. The ground narrowed, cloaked in old leaves and shields. Yes, shields of various sizes, adorned with crests, long faded beyond recognition. They seemed to have sprouted from the earth itself, half covered in moss, lined up like markers in a cemetery that never received a visitor. I touched one of them. It was cold, even under the warm light of the late afternoon sun, and it produced a hollow sound when I tapped it with my knuckles, as if inside. There was nothing but echo. The forest surrounding me seemed to be watching. The trees were all crooked, as if they tried to flee from their own roots. Curving branches intertwined above the path, creating a kind of natural tunnel. The light inside took on a greenish hue, liquid and shimmering with the breeze, which sometimes blew in my face, sometimes at my back, and occasionally from within. An odd noise filled the air, a whisper, perhaps the rustling of leaves, but it also felt like a call. Disjointed phrases drifted through the air. Turn back, or move forward, or wait. I couldn't tell if it was the forest speaking or just my weary mind trying to converse with itself. The path descended slightly, and in places it sank into dark, thick mud, as heavy as root soup. My feet sunk to my ankles, and with each step I felt as though I was crushing old memories, my own, or those of others. At one point I stumbled upon a fire pit that was still warm, a sign that someone had been there, or would be. Beside it sat a horn mug with remnants of some infusion. I sniffed it, lavender and something bitter, perhaps walnut shell, awaiting tea, for someone who was in no hurry to forget. A bit further on, I came across a shield hanging from a branch, different from the others. This one was clean, freshly polished, with a spiral crest. Oddly, it was spinning slowly, as if the branch swayed just because of it. There was no wind, no sound, just that gentle, hypnotic rotation that made me lose track of time. There. I think I dozed off on my feet. I dreamt of screams, high-pitched, elongated cries that echoed from deep within the trees. When I awoke, my helmet was off my head, carefully placed on the ground with a stone inside it, like a gift, or a warning. I looked back. No sign of the trail of shields, no sound of footsteps, only the soft creaking of damp leaves rearranging themselves as if they had never been stepped on. I continued moving, or perhaps floating. It was hard to tell. A memory struck me like a spark. I had passed this way before, with others, maybe on patrol. There was a dwarf grumbling about thorns, an elf speaking to the mushrooms, and a boy laughing at everything. Or did I dream this during one of my naps by the fire? It didn't matter. They were with me, in some realm of memory. At the edge of the path, I spotted a shield split in half, serving as a door to a burrow. Warm steam wafted out, and a noise, a low growl, very much like that of a boar or an old man sleeping soundly. I felt a pang of envy. Shortly after, I came across a small altar made of stacked stones, 7 of them, with a blue feather resting atop the last one. It shimmered. Perhaps it belonged to a creature that had flown by centuries ago, or to an imaginary bird that only appears on nights like this. I picked it up and tucked it between the pages of a map I never learned how to read. The end of the trail, I never saw it. I think it continues to this day, growing on its own. But at a certain point, everything turned very white, a type of diffuse light without source or direction. And then I awoke in the middle of a field of low flowers, surrounded by shields now serving as seats for crows. They stared at me, motionless, no cawing, no flapping of wings, just watching, like judges, or the ghosts of soldiers who chose to become birds. In that moment, I wrestled with a gnawing doubt. What if all those shields were nothing but memories of battles that never took place, monuments to things I wanted to do and never did? Sometimes I wonder if all of this really happened. There was a mountain far in the distance, always in the distance, as if it existed forever between the horizon and memory. Gray with deep grooves like scars, and a persistent mist cloaking its peak, as if the gods had lost their old blankets there. I knew it by another name, or rather no name at all. It was the mountain from which the giants were said to come. The same giants who never arrived. For months, perhaps years, or just one particularly long night, they were awaited. Scouts claimed to hear their footsteps, thud, pa, thud, like drums buried in the ground. Others spotted massive marks on the stones, similar to footprints or trails. And then there were the rumbles, oh, those rumbles, like rude thunder coming from the earth's belly. But on the morning I decided to climb it, what accompanied me was just the sound of my stomach and the creaking of my chainmail, which seemed to sigh with exhaustion at every movement. The mountain path was made of loose stones that slipped beneath my feet, like bad memories. The vegetation was sparse, filled with twisted bushes and lichens that resembled maps of places that didn't exist. The air there was dense, heavy, as if breathing was a reluctant favor the mountain granted me. At a certain point, I stumbled upon a cave, an irregular opening in the slope, smelling of mushrooms and rust. I stepped inside, because, tired nights don't have much sense. Just old curiosity. Inside it was pitch dark, only the sound of droplets falling somewhere, and a snore. A deep, slow snore that made the cave vibrate slightly, as if it were asleep itself. It's him, I thought, the sleeping giant. I approached cautiously. My footsteps echoed oddly, as if there was no real ground beneath me. And then I saw something. A heap of old cloth. Or was it skin? A thick, wrinkled hide, breathing softly. It was enormous, covering nearly the entire back wall. I stood there, frozen, waiting for the moment when it would awaken, when it would rise, when it would speak. But nothing happened, just the snoring. Maybe it was the giant. Maybe it was the wind choking in the stone crevices. Or more likely, my own stomach chatting with the emptiness. I sat down and waited. For how long? Impossible to tell. Perhaps a few hours, maybe centuries. As I waited, I noticed inscriptions on the wall, crooked letters carved hastily or in desperation. One said, "I'll be back soon." Another, "Don't wake the snore." And a third, covered with slime, seemed to be my name, or something very close to it. That made me uncomfortable, or flattered. Who knows? I left the cave quietly. The mountain watched me, unmoving, like a bored elder. I continued to climb and stumbled upon something curious. A tent. A trap? A relic? I couldn't tell. Inside, there were cushions, dust-covered musical instruments, and a map that only showed the interior of the mountain, with paths leading back to the same spot. Here, the old Thumb snored. Thumb, of course, the name of the giant who never came. All the bards spoke of him, a massive, sleepy warrior who promised to awaken at the moment of battle. He never woke up. Perhaps because the battle never happened, or because Thumb never existed at all. Nearby I saw a small altar with offerings, moldy bread, copper coins, and a poorly made clay sculpture. Eyes closed. I don't know if that was a tribute or an attempt at bribery. It began to rain, heavy, slow drops, as if the mountain were also weeping from laziness. I took shelter under a jaw-shaped rock and slept. I dreamt of footsteps, many, enormous footsteps, and deep voices calling my name, or cursing my name, or laughing at me. I woke up alone, of course. The cave was no longer there. The snore was gone, too. Just a leaf stuck to my armor, with a message written in charcoal. He comes when no one believes anymore. Well, sometimes I wonder if all of this really happened. After the mountain, or the dream of the mountain, I descended a winding path that led to a nameless valley. They called it the Valley of Choked Fog, but no one dared say it out loud. It was as if the very name got caught in the throats of those who tried to pronounce it. The fog there wasn't like the others. It had substance, density, almost a sound, and a smell. Yes, a strange smell, somewhere between forgotten rust and damp cloth, as if all the wars of the world had decayed there and then evaporated. Crossing that place felt like diving into a warm, formless liquid. Each step made a spongy sound. My arms seemed to vanish in front of my body. Sometimes I reached out my hand and could no longer see it. I walked slowly, guided by nothing but the rhythm of my own thoughts, which too became muddled there. I remembered a name, then forgot it. I thought of a mission, and it morphed into the lyrics of a song, and the more solid memories, like that of the empty field, the trail of shields, the sleeping giant, all began to dissolve, as if the fog was sucking the clarity from my ideas. At one point, or maybe 2, or 10, I heard voices. First a murmur, then a single word, "Turn back," followed by laughter, high-pitched, childish giggles, coming from above, perhaps from invisible branches, or from within the fog itself. I stopped and saw shadows. 3, 4, maybe 5. They walked alongside me, next to me, or just inside my mind. They were armed, each with crude weapons, crooked spears, cracked shields. Their faces seemed familiar, perhaps the visages of companions who had long fallen in battles that never really happened. One of them looked at me and smiled. It was a sad smile from someone who knows they have died or never lived at all. I kept walking. The fog thickened. I felt moisture creeping up my back like icy fingers, and then I stumbled over something hard. A body? Number A bell, small, made of oxidized bronze, attached to a rusty chain that disappeared into the mist. I touched it. It swung, but made no sound. Nothing, no noise. Curious. I took the bell and hung it from my belt. Perhaps it would speak later. I pressed on and found ruins, the remains of a village, stone walls without roofs, steps leading to nowhere, dry wells. In one of the houses, I spotted a chair covered in lichen, and on it, a teacup. Full. I picked it up. It was warm. I inhaled the aroma, something between rosemary and lament. I took a sip. The world spun a little. Maybe it was the tea. Maybe it was the exhaustion. I sat in the chair. Time seemed to wrap around me. I heard footsteps, heavy ones, coming from within the fog. The bell on my belt moved on its own, still without sound. And then the fog spoke, with my voice. "You shouldn't be here." I responded with something. I can't recall what. Maybe I apologized, or simply smiled, just like the shadow had before. The fog receded. It didn't dissipate. It merely withdrew from me, opening a crooked path through the ruins. I walked along it, the cup still in my hand, emptying itself. Ahead I came across a tree, alone, twisted. Surrounding it were chains, many of them, all broken. And resting on its roots was a wooden sign, nearly faded. Doubt was buried here. I stood for a long time looking at that. Doubt buried. What kind of soil accepts something like that? And why would someone take the trouble to bury it? Perhaps because it always comes back. I resumed walking, and suddenly, without any transition, I stepped out of the fog, as if it had given up on following me, or grown tired of me. Behind me, the valley swallowed the path. There was no longer an entrance, no exit, just the smell of rust, lingering in my hands. Sometimes I wonder if all of that really happened. Beyond the fog, there was a plateau where the wind seemed to have settled as its only inhabitant. There stood a tower, solitary, tall, made of dark stones, as heavy as unresolved memories. But what drew the eye wasn't the tower itself. It was the banner atop it, faded red. With a symbol that could have been a bird or a scar, it waved with a vigor that defied even the laziness of time itself. And the oddest part? There was no staircase, no door, no window. Just a smooth, untouched tower crowned with a living flag. I can't say exactly what compelled me to approach. Perhaps it was the sound. Yes, because it produced a sound. Not the typical fluttering of fabric in the breeze, but something between a whisper and a song, as if the very banner was sharing its story, only in a language no modern ear could understand. I lay down on the dry grass, gazing at it. The sun behind created a halo around the fabric, and for a moment, I felt as if I were looking at something sacred, or at the very least, something older than myself. The tower had a smell. Strange to say, but it did. The scent of damp parchment, of dried ink, of unspoken words. Back where I came from, banners always needed an army. Arms to carry them, voices to shout forgettable slogans. This one, however, waved alone, as if it needed no one else. Or perhaps it simply refused company. I ran my fingers over the ground and felt a shallow groove, a circle precisely drawn, outlining the entire base of the tower. Inside it lay charred earth, ancient ashes, small stones arranged in a spiral. A ritual, a warning, or just the pastime of a retired wizard. I impulsively sat in the center of the spiral. Nothing happened. I closed my eyes. I heard footsteps behind me, slow, heavy. But when I turned, there was only the empty field and the sound of the banner, singing a little louder. I waited. Maybe something would descend. Perhaps the tower would accept me. But it remained there unmoving, as if mocking my anticipation. I picked up a twig and wrote my name in the dirt. The ground swallowed it within seconds. Later, as I rested, an old man approached, or rather passed by. He carried a staff made of bird bones. He looked at the tower, then at me. "It only comes down when it forgets it's up there," he said. I asked him to explain. He simply smiled and moved on, stepping where I had avoided. I pondered this. Perhaps the banner didn't even realize it was waving. Maybe it was trapped in a tower that was, in itself, a form of forgetfulness. I wrote something else in the dirt. "Are we here?" Nothing answered. As night fell, the sunlight hit the fabric in such a way that I saw something different. Letters embroidered on it. Faint, impossible to read, yet familiar. Like a childhood song you forgot but still recognize. I took my sword. I plunged it into the ground next to the tower. A gesture of surrender, a challenge, or merely fatigue. The blade vibrated for a moment, a sharp, brief sound, which was met by the banner spinning more fiercely. I had the impression it saw me. Or maybe I dreamt that while I dozed off with my head resting on the sword's hilt. The wind stopped. The flag did not. Sometimes I wonder if all of this really happened. I descended from the plateau with the doorless tower, leaving its banner lingering in the back of my mind like a thought that refuses to finish. It was in a damp, deep clearing that I stumbled upon the puddle. Just one, small, as if it had been left behind by a distracted giant who was wetting his feet. The water was still, no leaves, no visible life, but so clear that the sky reflected in it wasn't the same as what hung above my head. While gray clouds crawled across the real firmament, the watery mirror displayed a vibrant blue with golden birds gliding slowly across. I knelt down, wary, and looked. I saw a battle, not the kind recounted with pride in the halls, but a silent one, in slow motion, like a dance. Men and women in light armor wielding swords as if caressing the wind. No shouts, no falls, just repeated movements, circling, as if they were all doomed to fight forever without truly touching one another. I touched the surface of the puddle. The figures looked at me. Yes, I'm sure of it. They froze. Then one of them, a warrior with green eyes and mossy hair, raised a hand, as if asking for help, or for silence. And then everything fell apart. The image twisted, turned into bubbles. I saw only water again. Startled, I recoiled. But there was a strange feeling within me, as if I had left something behind, or brought something back. Beside me was a stone covered in symbols. One of them resembled the crest of my old clan, the one I thought I had forgotten. How had it come to be here? I decided to wait. The puddle, motionless, showed no signs of repeating the spectacle. But around it, the ground seemed more alive. Iridescent mushrooms sprouted in a circle like sentinels. One of them glimmered for a moment when I approached, and it let out a chirp, a sharp, almost childish sound. I sat down and closed my eyes. I dreamt of falling swords, descending slowly, like petals. They touched the ground and turned into leaves. The sky of the dream was the one in the puddle. Too blue, too unreal. I woke up with the sense that I had forgotten something important, like the name of a friend who had been with me for years, and then vanished. A name you can feel on your tongue but can never grasp. I returned to the puddle. It was dry. In its place was only a circle of darker earth, and tiny footprints, many. At the center, a clay cup, filled with cold tea. I drank, without thinking. It tasted of iron and lavender. The real sky remained cloudy. The one in my eyes still shimmered, as if reflecting a time that never happened. Before leaving, I wrote something with my finger in the damp earth, a phrase whose meaning I didn't even know, but it felt right. When I stood up, the phrase had vanished. Sometimes I wonder if all of that really happened. Further on, guided by nothing but a warm breeze and the loosely stitched memories of the puddle, I arrived at what was once a castle, or at least the idea of one. Broad walls, cloaked in ivy, with towers that no longer pointed to the sky but leaned toward one another, like old men arguing over who forgot to put out the fire. I passed through the broken gate without resistance. The rotting planks creaked beneath my feet, as if complaining about being awakened. Inside, the courtyard was taken over by fungi, all kinds, colors, and textures. Some looked like cushions, while others appeared as small red smiles sprouting from the stone. I walked slowly. Each step echoed uniquely, as if the ground decided to invent a new sound with every movement. In the main hall, where nobles had once shouted orders and squires had stumbled with goblets, there was absolute silence. No bats, no wind. Just a smell, wet wood, forgotten candles, and a hint of cinnamon. Go figure. There stood the throne, or at least what remained of it, made of stone, shaped in spirals, and on the seat, fungi, an entire mantle of light-colored mushrooms, like ancient snow, creating a form that suggested a presence, as if the throne had already chosen another king, one who didn't speak, one who simply grew. I touched the base of the throne. It was warm. It vibrated subtly, as if it were breathing or snoring. I looked around. On the walls, decaying tapestries depicted battles I didn't recognize, warriors with blank faces wielding spears made of shadow. In one tapestry, a knight knelt before what appeared to be a crowned mushroom. You can laugh. I laughed too. But then I stopped, because beside the throne there was a helmet, mine, or at least identical to the one I lost years ago, during a crossing of a bridge that only existed when it rained. I picked up the helmet. Inside, moist earth and thin roots. And something else. A blue feather. The very same from the Trail of Shields. It was as if the castle had gathered everything I had forgotten. A museum of my own negligence. I sat on the lowest step of the throne, and there I stayed, talking to the fungus. Yes, talking. And I think it responded, not with words, but with slight tremors in the air, with bursts of golden spores dancing in the filtered light from the broken windows. I shared with it the battles I hadn't fought, the loves I hadn't pursued, the letters I wrote but never sent because the raven seemed too depressed. The fungus listened, absorbed, expanded just a bit more. I fell asleep there and dreamed of a banquet. Fungi instead of food, goblets filled with mist, invisible guests dancing a slow waltz, their feet glued to the ground. The Mushroom King summoned me to the front. He asked me to sit. I knelt. I was crowned with a tiara of moss and feathers. I woke up lying on the cold ground. The throne was empty. The fungus had receded, as if embarrassed by what it had shown. I took one last glance around the hall. Everything was quiet, as if it were saying, "That's enough for today." I left. Sometimes I wonder if all of that really happened. After leaving the castle, or perhaps it left me, I wandered aimlessly, the moss crown still itching my forehead, and the scent of mushrooms trailing behind me like an old dog. The sky gradually darkened, not with clouds, but with a gentle darkness emerging from within the stones, the trees, and my very bones. And then I heard the bell, a deep, drawn-out chime, followed by another, smaller and hesitant, as if asking, "Is it time?" I followed the sound, slowly, as if reluctant to arrive. It came from a hill covered in low herbs and pale flowers, as if someone had tried to plant light there and simply forgot to water it. At the top, there stood a chapel, small, squint, made of gray stone, with no windows, no door. A bell hung from a wooden structure above the slanted roof, swaying gently even without a breeze. I knocked on the wall, out of habit. It responded with a hollow, mournful sound. I sat on the steps, 3 worn into the earth, and I waited. Another bell rang, this one higher pitched, maybe a second bell inside, or perhaps just in my head. I began to hear voices, not shouts, harmonies, ancient songs in languages I didn't recognize, yet strangely they soothed me. They reminded me of the melodies monks sang on misty mornings when we still believed faith could be carried like a shield. I touched the bell. It resonated with a sound that wasn't really a sound, an internal vibration, as if my chest had become a second bell. Something within me chimed, and then a crack in the wall, thin, like a fracture of time. I peered inside. There were benches turned over, an altar covered in leaves, a fallen painting showing a knight with a blank face, and on the back wall, a dark red inscription. All the dead here were forgotten before they died. I stepped back. The bell stopped ringing, and a figure emerged from behind the chapel, a man, or something like that. In a robe made of patches, with a crooked staff and bells hanging all over, he walked as if he could hear music that others couldn't. "Did you hear it?" he asked. I nodded, unsure if it was a yes or a no. "Then that's enough." He handed me a piece of stale bread and a wilted flower bud. Then he stepped into the chapel through the wall. Yes, through the stone, as if he were merely denser fog. I waited a bit longer, not for him, for the bell, to see if it would ring again. It did not. Next to the chapel, I discovered a buried box. Inside were small bells, all tied with red threads, one for each name, names that no one remembers anymore. I chose one, no name, just a sound. I hung it at my waist, next to the one that no longer chimed. I continued on, not knowing for whom the bells tolled, nor when or if, but certain that one day, perhaps they would toll for me. It was after the bells that I stumbled upon the orchard. I can't even say how I got there. One moment, I was at the foot of the chapel hill. The next, I found myself among low trees with thick trunks and wide canopies, laden with fruits that hung like sleepy eyes. The ground was carpeted with dry leaves and feathers, so many feathers, white, brown, and blue, as if a flock had decided to rest there forever. The fruits emitted a rich scent, something between honey and old paper. Just breathing in made my eyes feel heavy. I touched one. It was soft, warm. It fell effortlessly into my palm as if it were saying, "Now it's your turn." I bit into it, and the world sank. I didn't fall, but my knees gave in like old promises. I sat beneath the tree, chewing slowly. Sweet, very sweet, the kind that makes your eyes close involuntarily. And then came the dreams, dreams within dreams, dreams that felt like memories, memories that seemed like stories belonging to others. I found myself on a battlefield. Unlike the first one, the one at the beginning, this one was made of shattered glass. The swords chimed like bells, and the soldiers wore not armor but cloaks of smoke. I fought. Yes, I fought. Or at least I tried. But the enemies laughed. They laughed with voices I recognized, voices of companions who had shared wine with me under forgotten tents. I awoke within the dream, in a tent, alone. Outside, footsteps and muffled shouts. I pulled back the curtain, and I was back in the orchard. But everything was hazy. The trees swayed slowly, as if dancing to a tune of their own. And there were others there, figures sitting or lying down, all with fruits in hand, sleeping, laughing silently. One of them looked at me. It was me, or someone very much like me. "We've eaten too much," he said. "It's time to go." But I didn't get up. I picked another fruit, took a bite. I returned to the first dream, only now I was the enemy, and I wore the face of an old man ringing bells. I dreamed so many times I lost count. In one I carried a banner made of mushrooms. In another I marched alongside a snoring giant. And in yet another, perhaps the strangest, I sat on a melting throne. I woke up with a sweet taste in my mouth. The trees were quiet. The sky had the color of cold tea. I stood up. My legs were wobbly, my body lighter, as if I had left something there, or traded a part of myself for dreams. At the edge of the orchard, there was a sign stuck in the ground. Warning, fruits for the consumption of memories. Do not exceed 1 per life. I smiled and walked on, with the taste of fruit on my teeth and the certainty that, at least in some dream, I won a battle, or lost gloriously, or ran away. Who will know? There was a plain just beyond the orchard, coated in dark mud, the kind that clings to your boots and saps your energy with the same voracity. They said a battle had been fought there long ago, not due to its significance, but because it had been recounted so many times in so many different ways. This time, I wasn't alone. Yes, I had company, fellow travelers, or memories. I couldn't say if they were really there or if they were echoes of those who had dreamt with me in the orchard's fruits. But they laughed. They argued. One of them, an old archer with bushy eyebrows, insisted that under that mud lay buried the enemy. Not an enemy, but the enemy. We started to dig, with swords, makeshift shovels, even our bare hands. The mud resisted, giving way reluctantly. It smelled of rust and burnt tea. We found things. First a boot, with a foot still inside, then a corroded half-armor, inscribed with runes that faded as we read them. And finally, a spear. Beautiful, long, made of dark wood with an obsidian tip, buried at an angle, as if it had been thrust there by someone who tripped. When we pulled it out, the mud sighed. The tip gleamed with a light that came from nowhere. Everyone fell silent. One of them, I think his name was Ran, tried to grasp it. The spear recoiled. Yes, it pulled back, as if it were alive and didn't like unfamiliar hands. Then I stepped closer. It recognized me. Or perhaps it merely accepted my grip out of boredom. I touched its surface, cold and warm at the same time. On the shaft, an inscription read, "For the one who does not seek victory, but memory." I smiled. I pointed the spear toward the sky. Nothing happened. Then I planted it back into the mud in the same spot. We sat in silence. "Is that it?" someone asked. "Yes," I replied. That was all. We went back to digging, not for weapons, but for stories. We found a torn letter, written in purple ink, a chunk of wall, a button from a coat bearing a headless dragon crest. One companion found a skull and said, "Look, it's me in a little while." We laughed, then fell silent. As evening fell, the entire plain seemed to sink a little, as if it were weary of being explored. We gathered around the spear, now standing tall and still. Someone brewed tea, mushroom tea. I drank it without asking which mushroom. I dreamed of the spear, only smaller, like a toy. And I was a child, trying to remember how to fight. I woke up with mud on my face, and the certainty that no matter how much we dug, we would only uncover more versions of what we had already forgotten. Before I left, I buried my glove there, a gift for whoever digs after me. Sometimes I wonder if all of that really happened. At a fork between two paths of loose stone, there was a half-rotted wooden sign. It read, in shaky letters, "Maiden ahead. Bring flowers." Someone had crossed out flowers and written tea, then crossed out tea and added stories. We moved on. At that moment, there were three of us. I, a young man carrying a cracked mirror, and a woman who claimed to be an expert in translating fungi. None of us knew exactly who the maiden was. All we knew was that, according to tales told by travelers who never repeat their stories, she always appeared by the campfire, but only if someone was willing to wait and wait. We reached the spot at dusk, a small circle of stones in a clearing, an extinguished fire pit, a rustic bench made of swollen wood, and a kettle hanging from a rusty iron rod, as if it were waiting for hands to use it. We lit the fire. We arranged the space. The young man placed the mirror next to the bench. "So she can see how beautiful she is," he said. The woman mycologist gathered something that looked like mint from a log and prepared a bluish tea. I just watched. We waited. The night fell slowly. The wind made the flames bend like they were bowing in reverence, and the bench was empty. At some point, we heard footsteps, then laughter, then the sound of someone clearing their throat. We all looked. Nothing. Just the trees gently swaying, like they were about to doze off. The woman said she could smell an old perfume. The young man swore he saw a shadow sitting for a moment. I didn't see anything, but the kettle jingled on its own, and that was enough. We shared stories, all of them interrupted midway by forgetfulness or yawns. Each of us remembered a different version of the maiden. Some said she was old. Others said she was a child. A few, the bolder ones, claimed she was, in fact, all of us. Midnight arrived. The fire burned low. The bench, still empty. Before sleeping, someone placed a wilted flower on it. I dreamed of voices, many, all female. They whispered incomprehensible things to me. One of them murmured, "I've arrived, but you were looking the wrong way." I woke up with the sun at my eyelids. The bench was still there, the flower gone. On the ground, light footprints, and a cup of tea, still warm, where there had been nothing before. The maiden? Maybe she came. Maybe she never existed. Perhaps she sat beside me in the silence that no one noticed. I left my canteen there, filled with warm water, for her, or for the next one. It was on a flat rock, too high for trees and too lonely for echoes, that I found the letter. Carefully folded inside a dusty, time-worn bottle, it was forgotten among stones that seemed made to conceal secrets. I'm not sure why I opened it, perhaps out of habit, or maybe because the silence there was too profound to ignore. The paper creaked between my fingers, as if waking from an ancient slumber. The edges were damp, partially eaten away by moss. And the letters? Oh, the letters. They were delicate, small, written in ink that smelled of salt. Not sea salt, but the salt of tears. For whoever finds this, it said at the start. Then everything became fragmented. Endless phrases, words jumbled, sentences that began as military commands and ended as farewell poems. One passage read, "We will attack at dawn, if the heart allows." Another, "Don't forget the mug with the loose lid." There were references to a commander with a face shrouded in shadows, to a bridge that crumbled with words, and to a messenger who always arrived before the message. A section, almost illegible, mentioned my name, or a name that sounded very similar. I read and reread. With each reading, more words faded away. They evaporated from the paper as if they'd been written in tea steam. I tucked the letter into my cloak, hoping to protect it. Yet I felt right then that it was dissolving against my chest, as if it never wanted to be carried away from that rock. I sat down. The wind there was cold and constant, like an old nurse rocking the world to sleep. And on the horizon, low clouds drifted like memories refusing to leave. I pondered how many letters had been written and forgotten, how many wars began with words and ended in silence. Nearby, I found a stone pedestal marked by something that had once been affixed there. A statue, perhaps, or another letter, sheltered by time and disdain. On the ground, pieces of wax, remnants of candles that had once been lit by hands that believed in rituals. I closed my eyes and imagined. Perhaps I had written that letter, maybe to myself. A reminder that there are no right battles, only stories that slip through our fingers like the ink of those letters. When it was time to leave, I returned to the bottle. Inside, there was only vapor. After the letter that dissolved in my chest, I walked across a field of flat stones, laid out like pieces on a forgotten board. The sky hung low, as if tired of being so high, and the air tasted of ancient dust and dried rosemary. That was when I heard the galloping, a steady rhythmic sound, the weight of many hooves on wet ground. But there was no rain, no footprints. I looked around. The plain was vast and empty. Only me and the sound. It came from far away. It came from close. It circled me like a dance, as if invisible horses were tracing circles around me, waiting for a command that would never come. And then they appeared. Shadows, riding nothing, horses without riders, with flowing manes and eyes as white as clouds. They galloped with purpose, but without direction. They passed right by me, some so close I felt the warmth of their bodies, the scent of sweat and leather. But there was no one guiding them, no reins, no saddles, just the strange freedom of those who were freed too late. One of them stopped. It stared at me. No, it locked its gaze onto me. And for a moment I saw my reflection in its eyes, not as I am now, but as I once was, young with armor still gleaming, the promises weighing more than the regrets. I reached out my hand. It neighed and vanished. In the spot where it had stood, a deep hoofprint filled with water. Inside it, a blue feather. The same one, always the same. I touched it. It was warm. I moved on. At the top of a low hill, I found an old man surrounded by harnesses, hanging from a makeshift fence. He smiled. "They come when they want to forget who rode them," he said. I asked for shelter. He offered me a bench. We sat together. We watched the horses pass by one, sometimes one with battle marks, others with flowers woven into their manes, some with closed eyes, and still galloping. I was one of them, the old man whispered. I didn't ask how. I drank tea, bitter, made of roots and silence. Night came slowly. The horses vanished with the darkness as if they had never existed at all. As I was leaving, the old man gave me a horseshoe. "To remind you not to forget," he said. I tucked it into my cloak and descended the hill, feeling with each step the sound of galloping continue within my chest. It was on a hill surrounded by stones that creaked in the wind. Yes, they creaked. That I found the old wine cellar, hidden beneath a pile of dry ivy, like a secret that had stopped trying to hide. The door was made of iron, rusty and secured with a piece of fabric. Nothing more, no latch, no spell, just a well-tied knot, as if to say, only for those who still know how to untie knots. I untied it. Inside it was cool, like the shoulders of dawn, and dark. The light of the fire I carried seemed more timid in there. On the floor, rows of bottles buried halfway in white sand, like ancient amphorae sleeping. The smell was of overripe fruit and dreams kept safe. Wine, dust on the corks, cobwebs between the hooks, and a note pinned to the wall by a crooked nail. Don't drink to remember, but if forgetting is inevitable, help yourself. I found it poetic and practical. There was a goblet atop a barrel, clean, waiting. I chose a bottle, the most opaque one. It had a label with the crest of a kingdom that existed only in childhood maps. I opened it. The sound was soft, a sigh more than a pop. I poured. The liquid held a color like illuminated rust, thick, with the scent of wet fields and sheets that had been stored away for too long. I drank. My tongue tingled for a moment. Then memories surfaced, one after another, all with flavor. Some sweet, a kiss between tents, others bitter, a goodbye without words. I sat on the floor. I took another sip. The cellar changed. Now there were tables, voices, laughter, companions I hadn't seen in centuries, dreams, all toasting, all raising goblets to stories that never ended. One of them, a thin warrior with deep-set eyes, passed me a dark wine-like ink. "This one's to forget," he said. Another, a woman clad in fabric armor, handed me a light golden wine. "This one's to remember." I mixed the two. I drank. I cried. I laughed. I fell asleep on the barrel. I dreamed of a battle, of course, but everyone was unarmed, and they danced, trampling grapes, singing war songs that sounded like lullabies. I woke up alone. The bottle was empty. The note on the wall had faded. In my hand was a cork engraved with the words, "Thank you for coming." I left the cellar. The door closed on its own. The fabric knot reformed in the air, as if it had been trained to do so. I continued on my way, feeling lighter, or more intoxicated. It's hard to say. Sometimes I wonder if all of that really happened. Just when the road seemed to vanish, I saw the bridge. It wasn't large, nor imposing. It was made of gray wood with worn ropes and planks that creaked like grumbling old men. But it hung over an emptiness. Not water, not a chasm, just a blank space, as if the world had forgotten to sketch that part. I crossed it. Each step made a different sound. A tinkle, a crack, a whisper. The bridge seemed to play a strange instrument, a harp of memories. At the center, a post with signs. None were legible, just arrows pointing in every direction, even upward. One of them trembled without any wind. I paused there. I looked back. Nothing. The road I had come from was gone. Just the bridge remained. I pressed on. On the other side, the field. That field. The first one. The faded grass, the dry trunk, the motionless stones. I turned back. The bridge was still there. I crossed it again. On the other side, the field. The same, but not quite. The details changed subtly. The position of the trunk, the moss on the stones, the sound of the wind, as if I entered a new version with each crossing. I did this 4 times. On the 5th, the field was dark, with stars on the ground and fire in the sky. On the 6th, the field was flooded, with fish swimming among the swords. On the 7th, there was a boy throwing stones at the clouds. He looked at me, smiled, said, "You're late." On the 8th, everything was silent. No wind, no sound. And the bridge had vanished. I stood there, I walked. I returned to the trunk, sat down, the same spot where I began this story. Or another story. The sky looked the same, but with less sky. Far off, the tower of the banner fluttered, the trail of shields glimmered, a horse whinnied in some forgotten corner. It was as if everything were contained there, as if the entire world were just a field disguised as memory. And beside me, a mark in the earth. My name, scratched in. And below it, return across the bridge that is no longer there. I sighed. I lay back on the trunk. The grass was soft now. The sky felt heavy. I woke up to the sound of something light tapping against my leg. It was the quiver, still hanging from my left side, as old as my stories, as silent as most of them. Inside it, there was a single arrow, the last one. I didn't remember putting it there, or using it, but it had always been there like a thought that never fully forms. The shaft was made of dark wood, like a moonless night. The tip was still sharp, but it wasn't ordinary. It was made of frosted glass, as if it had been shaped from the tear of a spirit. And the fletching blue, naturally. I lifted the arrow against the light. It cast no shadow. It only reflected an ancient gleam, the light of dawns I may have never seen. I sat down in the field. I looked around. Nothing worth hitting. No trees, no enemies, no targets. I thought, maybe that was its purpose, to remain unused. I recalled battles, many of them. In none did I use this arrow. Even in moments when I thought, now's the time, something made me keep it. Perhaps it was fear, or respect, or forgetfulness. The problem with arrows is that once they're shot, they cease to belong to you. And this one seemed to want to stay. Still on that day, there in the field I knew all too well, I raised the bow. I drew the string back. The arrow settled into place with a solemn quiet. I aimed at the sky, at the south, at the tower, at myself. But I didn't release. The string trembled, and for a moment I saw myself as young again, with eyes still searching for certainties, with arms that didn't tremble. I let go, but only the bow. The arrow never left. It stayed lodged, as if the very wood had decided to refuse flight. I dislodged it. I looked at it, and I stowed it away again, in the same place, in the same silence. It was by chance, or as close to chance as one can get in a world where stones remember our steps. I was following a faded path, where the bushes opened out of laziness rather than habit. A light rain began to trickle from the branches in rhythmic drops, like fingers tapping on the lid of a coffin. The ground was soft, smelling of decayed roots and old things buried in haste. And there, in the sunken clearing surrounded by mushrooms that seemed to be whispering to each other, was the grave. Simple, A crooked stone slab, moss in the corners, a dried flower on top, and my name. Misspelled. Not due to a spelling mistake, but from hesitation. The first letter trembled. The last ones were nearly erased, as if the carver had doubts about who lay there, or who should lie there. I approached slowly, not out of fear, but out of respect. I read the epitaph. Here rests someone who almost fought. I laughed, low and to myself, because there was something familiar in that phrase, a sad tenderness, a joke told by someone who no longer cared about the ending. I sat beside the grave. The stone was warm, as if someone had just gotten up from it. Next to it, an overturned mug, a trace of tea still damp on the rim. It tasted of chamomile and charcoal. I stayed there for hours, talking, asking. I received no answers, just the rustle of the leaves, just the fine rain, just the weight of the wrong name. I thought about correcting it. I traced the right letter with my finger. The moss covered it in seconds. Maybe this wasn't my grave, or perhaps it was that of someone who dreamed of me. I stood up. I left my cloak on the slab. "For you not to feel cold," I said, as if someone could hear. I turned away and moved on. Sometimes I wonder if all of that really happened. The field faded behind me, or perhaps it walked with me all along. What does it matter? As night falls heavier than usual, each memory feels like a stone I carry not on my shoulders, but on my eyelids. The names blur together, the dates fade, the places overlap. The orchard becomes a bridge, the banner turns into fungus, and the maiden is just another whisper among so many. I feel the warmth of the campfire beside me, even though it went out many nights ago. The wood still crackles within me, the low sound, almost breath-like. A heart that burns slowly. The moss crown, the root tea, the arrow I never shot, all now shrouded in mist. A breath, smoke around my eyes. The embers no longer blaze. They only illuminate enough for us to know we are still here, for a little while. Sometimes I remember when I fought. Other times, I recall never having fought. But strangely, there's always a story in the midst of it all. A slow story, no rush, made for those who have already understood that time isn't racing, just dozing off. Maybe tomorrow I'll tell another, or maybe this was the last one. But for now, traveler, close your eyes. The fire still burns, even as the eyes close. The horses still gallop, even if no one sees them. And the towers still flutter banners for those who have forgotten what it means to fight. Rest. I will watch. Good night.